He's been on vacation for a week. He doesn't know how the mute button works anymore.
Good morning. Huh? Mute? What? Huh?
There you go.
You're listening to Dots, Lines, and Destinations, a travel podcast with hosts Stephen Seagraves, Fosma Moon, and Seth Miller.
Hello, and welcome to episode 432 of Dots, Lines, and Destinations. I'm Stephen Seagraves, joined by the full crew this week, Seth Miller and Fosma Moon. How you guys doing?
Doing great.
You relaxed, refreshed after your trip?
Oh, yeah.
Well, you Patreon subscribers are going to have to stick around to hear where you went. So,
Okay.
don't give away too much. I will tell you this: life changes once your toddler knows how to open doors. Having a toddler, you're just mostly just making sure they don't die, and then this just adds a level of complexity because it used to be you could just close the door and you're like, they're not going to go in there and they're not going to kill themselves, and now they can't. So it's added some fun. But
I was thinking that finally owning a pressure washer was what growing up was all about.
that's what being middle aged is.
Okay, I'd say.
Do you have a gas powered one or one of the electric ones?
Electric.
I found that they're actually pretty good. Like, they're powerful enough to do what you need to do.
Yeah, we moved in this house 5 years ago, and this is the first time I've pressure washed it. So I don't know how long prior to that they had done anything. So obviously, if I did it a little more frequently, it would be a little better. But it's getting stuff off. I mean, the sort of before and after, it's just the fun of like spraying it across and seeing the schmeg fly off is nifty.
It's kind of like here when you wash your car after there's been like a lot of pollen. You're just like, oh man, that's a new car. Tell me about China and U.S. slots. Is there an update to this? We talked
about this last week, and there was, the Financial Times put out a story basically saying that the U.S. refused to give China an equal number of slots, 12 weekly, to match what China had given the U.S. Under the whatever idiocy of the still sort of COVID rules that are in place.
Yep.
Unless China agreed that those planes would not overfly Russia en route to the United States. And it's unclear just how accurate that was, mostly based on the fact that less than 3 days later, the U.S. granted those slots to China. So China's up to 12, and there's no mention of not overflying Russia in there.
So we don't even know if that was actually what the requirement was.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if it was discussed, but it did not become a true requirement in the end. And the first of those 4 additional flights to get loaded was Beijing JFK. So that's almost certainly going to overfly Russia one way or the other.
Didn't Biden just have a meeting with Xi as well? I thought he was in China. Yeah, I thought he wasn't in China, but he was somewhere, and I think he met up with Xi just recently. So I wonder if that had something to do with it as well.
Yeah, I don't know. Where would that have been happened? Like Ireland?
It might have been, yeah. I can't remember. I'll find it.
Okay.
I don't know if he met with him. I know someone from the government met with him.
Yeah. I just wonder if maybe that was part of the things discussed.
Yeah, I'm sure it was being discussed, but yeah.
Yeah, his last meeting, it says, the only thing I can find is from November.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't know. I thought I read something that they'd met.
Yeah. But, so, good-ish, news-ish. More flights going between the China and the U.S. Still nowhere close to full capacity, though.
Yeah. Do you think, U.S. carriers, now that it's basically in line with the two are equal now, right?
Right.
Do we see an increase again to, U.S. carriers, I'm sure, are pushing to go back into China?
I'm sure at some point everybody wants the more slots to show up, but again, the U.S. carriers can't operate the nonstops from the East Coast very well right now.
Yeah.
So it would not surprise me if they are, say, tepid towards seeing some of that come back to full levels while waiting to sort things out. I know that China has changed some of the testing rules, but I don't know if the U.S. carriers are letting pilots overnight there yet or not.
Gotcha. I guess it leads to a kind of a follow-up question. The U.S. carriers have diverted planes. I wouldn't say diverted. They've used those planes that they were using in China to other routes. Do you think if they got to go back into China and were willing to put their pilots there, do you think that they would do that and pull those planes off these new routes that they've started?
Yeah, if the profits work, sure, why not?
Yeah.
If they can make more money out of it. This sort of goes back, and a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about the American Airlines and moving stuff around, and they put out in their earnings call part of one of the slides for their earnings call a couple of weeks ago was basically that wide body growth in the international markets represents 80-ish% of long haul growth year over year for the summer. And I struggled with that because it turns out part of the reason for that is they actually are shrinking short haul capacity internationally, which is why the long haul number isn't 80% and yet represents 80% of the growth. But it seems that, the U.S. carriers can move them around and do some things like that rather than having wide bodies on domestic routes. So there is room to play with that.
Yep.
It also depends on the airline, though, right? Like American has significantly fewer wide bodies than it had 4 years ago. United is close to the same.
Yep.
If not a few more. So different airlines, different plans, different concerns. And I would imagine they can play some games with the fleet utilization if they need to.
Yeah.
It does look like the U.S. carriers are now having nonstop flights filed into China. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed San Francisco, I think Shanghai is operating.
On United, yeah. Delta's got Seattle, Detroit, Shanghai nonstops. And American has DFW filed as well, Shanghai.
Yeah. And none of those have to go over Russia. I think the Detroit one maybe struggles a little bit, I think they're using an A350 on it, so maybe it doesn't struggle as much. But I know that if the winds are bad over Alaska, I'd be interested to see how that does.
Yeah.
United is bringing fries on board as the side dish for the cheeseburger. I don't know why this is news.
Are they resurrecting their old McDonald's partnership?
I heard they were going with McDowell's this time instead.
Oh, here, and I was hoping for a Happy Meal.
Oh man, that's what they do. They hand it to you as you hand on the step on the plane.
It's like
I just want to know why they're not doing tater tots.
Why would you want tater tots?
Well, A, because they're delicious. B, because I think they reheat better than French fries.
Well, I don't disagree with those facts. I guess what did they serve before with the cheeseburger? Nothing?
A little salad.
Yeah. So you get a salad and fries?
No. We got rid of the salad.
This gets better. I don't know. Fries reheating on an airplane. I don't have to see. I'm guessing they're going to be like steak fries with like really thick potatoes.
Sure.
What do you think?
I think it's a terrible idea.
It is. Foz?
I think it's a horrible idea.
Did you guys ever, were you guys ever fans of the cheeseburger in domestic first?
I was not.
It wasn't good.
It's been a long time since I had. I vaguely remember enjoying it at one point and then having it again more recently and like, is this the same thing? Was this any good?
Yeah.
So I don't know if it changed, if I changed.
I think the cheeseburger of like 10 years ago wasn't bad. I don't think it was great, but it definitely wasn't good.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't bad. So, yeah, I don't know. I just don't understand the fries thing, but I guess it's what people want. The FAA and the MAX. Tell me about it.
So this came up actually from a listener of ours about 15 minutes after we finished recording last week. So excellent timing on that one. But basically, there's an article out with the AP saying that at one point shortly after the Ethiopian MAX crash, a number of FAA officials and engineers were trying to get the plane grounded more quickly and were overruled because the document that they wrote suggesting a high chance of an additional accident was not formally completed and did not go through the necessary managerial review due to a lack of detailed flight data. And so when they finally waited for the original data to arrive, they were then able to say, yes, it looks like that's accurate. We should ground the plane. What's interesting about that to me, there's a lot of things. One is, how much do you trust the gut feeling of an engineer that, gosh, these things look mighty similar? Do you trust that without all of the data necessarily in place, especially when it's a safety situation? How much are you willing to react that way? And also, it was very interesting. I remember contemporaneously when the crash happened that the company, is it Ariane, that does the ADS-B space tracking on the Iridium satellites?
Yeah.
Kind of made some noise about the fact that they received a request from the FAA and for a copy of the data they had, and almost immediately after providing that data, the planes were grounded. And they basically said, yes, our data is what put the FAA over the edge to confirm that this plane needs to be grounded. And so that sort of lines up with this report now 4 years later.
I mean, I don't have a problem with it. Like, an engineer's gut. Like, I would rather err on the side of caution, right? Like, what? You've had a crash, and then you had a second crash, and they're saying you need to ground these planes. I don't know. Like, why wouldn't you? I mean, if it's all about money, then okay, I get it. But if you actually care about the customers and the people who will be flying on your planes, an engineer saying, "Hey, this is a problem," I think is something you should recognize. It's happened before in history, right? Where you look at like the things that NASA's put in place, right, for space launches after the Challenger explosion.
Yeah.
Or even before then, right? Like before, what was the first one, the big one, the fire on board? Was it Apollo, or was there was one before Apollo?
The Mercury.
Mercury, yeah. Then they put safety protocols in place for a reason. To me, it seems like the bureaucracy's on the wrong side of this, right? Where you're saying, I've got to have all of this stuff to ground an airplane.
Yeah.
If you look at the government interaction with corporate industry over the last 30 years, right? Corporate industry has a lot more control over the government than historically has.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I think there's a lot more influence, right? I think money talks, and people want to get paid.
Just go pull the statistics on how much lobbyist money is being flowed through Washington in like the 2000s versus in the 70s and 80s.
Although I'll say on the flip side, Foz, like if you look at the crashes that happened, I mean, there was crashes in the 70s and 80s too.
Yep.
With the same model of airplane, and those planes weren't necessarily grounded for quite a while. I don't know.
Well, part of that, I think, is that the planes today are inherently more complex, so solving the grounding issues and the technical issues associated with that is very challenging. I mean, I think wasn't really planning on doing this right here in the show notes, but if we segue a little bit into Go First's bankruptcy in India this week or last week, it's sort of a similar situation in that half their fleet was grounded because the Pratt & Whitney engines aren't working right. So they claim. Pratt obviously has a slightly different take on the situation, but how much can you handle of this technology? And we've talked about engines being sort of very complex and more troubles lately in new models than in history. But it's more than just Pratt & Whitney at this point. I mean, there was a picture from making the rounds from Iraqi Airways where like that bright green sheathing that goes around where the main turbine blade is had been like scraped up
by the blade hitting it?
Shredding.
From the blade rubbing it?
It's not clear, but I think that's implied, and that's scary as hell.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, Foz has said it before, right? Like we've been pushing the edge of like the technology, right? Like we've been pushing the edge of engine technology to make them better and more efficient and quieter. Yeah. And with all of that comes complexity, like you said, and more complex means it takes longer to solve the issues, and figure out what's going on. And so, I get part of it. I think it's a bad look in some ways for the FAA, though, that they sat on some of this until they had confirmation. Like, if there had been a third crash, right? Like, that would have been really bad.
Yeah.
But a question then becomes, is it the FAA and Boeing, right? Because if we think back to the 80s and 90s, we had a rudder problem with the early 737s.
Yep.
And we did nothing for a long time.
That's true. And Boeing should be required, or we should be expected to say, hey, wait a second, this is our plane. We're going to make some changes, and you need to ground the plane until then.
Right. Whereas when McDonnell Douglas had a problem with the MD-80 and the jack screw and the tail, they got grounded overnight.
Yep. Definitely. Tell me about some new seats from the Arabian Travel Market. Did you actually go, Seth?
No, I didn't. I just want to point out, Go First, I just want to finish sort of on that topic.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Go First is fully grounded. They filed for the Indian version of bankruptcy protection. And unlike a U.S. Chapter 11, apparently the lessors, the aircraft owners there, went after the planes and are trying to get a bunch of them pulled out of country. In the U.S., under bankruptcy protection, as the debtor, the leasing company basically can't do anything until the court lets them. And that seems to not be the case in India. So that's kind of exciting. Swiss has said a third of its A220 fleet is grounded because it's also used the gear turbofan. Air Baltic has talked and complained about its planes. They had one that's been grounded more than a year with engine issues. So there's some crazy shit going on there. It's more than just go first. So
yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see what Pratt & Whitney comes out and says about all this. Because you got
very little so far.
Yeah, it's silence is golden, I guess.
But moving on from that, new seats. There's a lot of new interesting stuff coming out. So Fly Dubai, this was I think 2 weeks ago, maybe it was last week. I can't tell anymore. Fly Dubai and Saudia both announced new single aisle flatbed suites. So I think it's Saudia is using the same seat as JetBlue basically has on their Mint, which is the Vantage Solo.
Mm-hmm.
And Fly Dubai is going with something else, which I have to know. They're calling it their Business Suite. And that's a seat that's, I think it's Collins. No, Safran's View seat. They're the launch customer, it would seem, at least for the Max. So it's interesting. That one, the nice thing about the Safran seat is your head is in the aisle and you're sort of facing the window, as opposed to the JetBlue seat where your head is in the window and you're facing the aisle. In neither case are you actually next to the window to look out it.
I see.
Great.
Yeah.
But that's one of the complex, challenges of having a single aisle plane and wanting flatbeds and density that's useful to the airline. So.
I'm convinced though low cost carrier means nothing anymore. Like wasn't Fly Dubai a low cost carrier or is a low cost carrier?
Sure, but what does it mean? Has low cost carrier meant anything for a long time?
I don't know. I mean, it's a conundrum.
I mean, it means that they try to keep their costs low, but it hasn't. And arguably, it sort of means unbundled services, but not even that necessarily. So it's hard to.
Have they always offered a business product like this though, or a business product?
For a long time, it always covers a lot. But yes, since 2019, they've had flatbeds on their Max in. This is their second or third. I think this is their third premium product, and one of them is a regional sort of not bedish solution, but this one and the 2019 one are both beds, so it's not entirely out of norm for Fly Dubai.
Okay. It seems like an odd thing, but
yeah,
I guess not.
I mean, they fly a lot of 6, 7, 8 hour routes. So Saudia is going to do the same thing, right? Saudia is taking their seat. I think they're saying that plane's going to go up into Europe. It's going to go across. I think they listed out some seats in the markets that they serve: Milan, Barcelona, Brussels, Rome, the Maldives, Dakar, Indian subcontinent. So, yeah, they are expecting to serve a relatively long range of flights.
I can't wait to go on Flyer Talk and hear the gnashing of teeth about a single aisle plane flying into Europe from Saudi Arabia or into the Maldives. Oh man. Okay, joke over.
With no alcohol.
Yeah.
Don't forget that.
Worst experience ever. And then what about Etihad? Or 787? Got some new seats, right?
Yeah, the 787 is getting a new business suite as well, a business studio. They all got different brand names. They're stupid. That's the one that's a Collins aerospace seat, which is also a new product on the market, relatively speaking. It has evolved from the A350-1000 for Etihad, so it is very much a new seat. It's flying on Starlux as well on their A350s, but this is the first time it will be on a 787. I would argue that more significant on the Etihad front is they picked Viasat Internet for these planes.
Okay.
So the Wi-Fi should be nice. There's a little bit of a problem there in that they've got to get the other satellites in orbit. And so I was down in Florida, we get rocket launch. Viasat doesn't really have global Ka-band coverage right now. And so without that, the internet service will be great where it exists, but there's a whole lot of the Middle East, Asia, Africa, et cetera, where there's no capacity at all.
Oh, interesting.
So, oopsie.
How many more satellites do they have they need to launch?
2 more. So they're doing a 3-satellite constellation for global coverage on top of the existing other satellites they have. They have 4 or 5, I think, in service that basically cover the Americas right now.
Okay.
And Viasat also leases capacity on one over the Middle East, so there's some coverage there, but not full range. You can't get all the way between Europe and the Middle East without dropping.
Gotcha.
So the second of the new Viasat satellites is supposed to go up around October of this year, and then the third is supposed to go up, and that was going to go cover EMEA, and then the Asia Pacific one is supposed to go up Q1, Q2 of next year.
Gotcha. Okay, that's good.
So, and these planes don't get delivered until Q3, so it could be 6 to 8 months of weird internet, but it should get solved relatively quickly.
We've got Breeze starting a Mexico route. They're going to do LA to Cabo.
Yeah.
Don't a bunch of other carriers do this?
Yeah. Yeah. There's like 6 or 7 flights a day. And they're going to fly once a week.
That'll make a difference.
Well, so here's the thing on that, right? I wonder about this a little bit. Like, does it mean they don't have to compete on price? They can offer a premium product that people will actually pay for, because that's a market that is, if they offer an affordable, right? I mean, you sell their premium product. If they sell that around where Delta's selling Comfort Plus, United sells like the premium of even more leg room. No, Economy Plus. JetBlue's even more space because JetBlue flies the route, right? If you price it around that same spot and call it your first class, and have your free Wi-Fi on board, like for those 125 passengers or 140 passengers, whatever it is a week, does that become slightly compelling at least?
Do they not have anywhere else to fly that A220? Is it because of their weird schedules that they have to do this? I mean, that's kind of what it seems like.
I mean, have to is a relative term. They're choosing to.
Well, I mean, you just don't want the plane to sit around. I get that, but like, it seems odd to start this route out of LA that's got a ton of competition when you could potentially use that plane elsewhere where there's maybe less like, it doesn't seem like a.
Maybe, it is.
Maybe you're right.
That they're choosing a route, and this is one of the, I think, the only route they've chosen to start so far that has not just one but multiple competing airlines on it.
Yeah,
that is definitely different, but they clearly think they can get the yield. So,
okay, I mean, more power to them.
Well, let's see if it runs before they can.
Yeah, let's see if they actually operate it. And then Delta has some Haneda slot flexibility, or they're trying to get some slot flexibility.
They're trying. So Haneda's weird. Haneda, the U.S. and Japan have an open skies agreement that in theory lets anybody fly anywhere as much as they want. It has for a relatively long time. Remember, like, U.S. Japan also had the onward Fifth Freedom route since the end of World War II.
Yep.
But Haneda was always limited. Separate from all the other rules, U.S. airlines sort of didn't have access to Haneda, and then when they originally got access in like 2010-ish, 12-ish, it was midnight departures only, and there were only 4 permitted, and then it was 12. It grew to 12 plus no night restrictions, or mostly no night restrictions in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And the airlines fought tooth and nail for those slots in 2019. And then, of course, 2020, the world ended. And so all of that planning sort of was for naught. And this, in the case of Delta, it lobbied hard because it did not have a partner in Japan that it should have priority access at Haneda so it could just move all of its operations to one place and not have to keep a split operation for the connections. And the DOT found that compelling and actually granted said request. And so Delta had 7 daily flights. They all moved over to Haneda. But the way the DOT allocated those slots, they were tied to U.S. gateways. So you couldn't just say, we want to fly. You had to say, we want to fly and from this airport. And that is very atypical in a open skies arrangement.
Huh.
And so now Delta's saying, like, hey, this doesn't make any sense. The market has shifted. You should let us, let the free market decide where we use these slots. And oh, by the way, we don't want to give them up, and we don't want to go through a new hearing to see if you're going to reallocate them to one of our competitors instead of letting us keep using them just somewhere else.
Which ones do they want to get rid of?
They were not explicit about that, but in the filing, they included a graph showing that, and this is another fun one. Delta has a bad habit of showing graphs to, with statistics to support their position that are not outright false, but also not entirely true.
Yep.
They chose to use data through March of 2023, which is before any of Japan's restrictions really lifted.
Yep.
As a reflection of how terrible demand is and how they need flexibility going forward. When one could argue, well, but now that you have started flying the planes again and have access to those markets, shouldn't demand come back because people don't have to get tested, and all those other things. So that's an interesting extra little bit in the Delta world. But Minneapolis has not recovered very well. Hawaii has definitely not recovered very well. Interestingly, to me, American Airlines seems to have agreed with Delta, at least initially, saying, yeah, we can understand why it'd be nice to have some flexibility here. We would support that.
But what do they want?
Right. Well, this is the Heathrow situation all over again when they got the Miami slot. And then just moved it.
Did they lobby for it somehow?
That one was as defined in the process. You had to operate at Miami for 3 years and then you could move it. And Delta did. And same with Philly, right?
Yep.
They operated the slots for the minimum time they had to and talked about how great they were for business. And then the minute they had the opportunity to go and actually do something that was truly useful for business, they walked away from the idiocy.
So what does American want then? Or do we have any idea?
American has said they support Delta's flexibility request, and presumably so that American can also move some of its slots around. Now, the flexibility would be only for up to 2 slot pairs and only for a 3-year trial period, although everybody obviously assumes that the trial will go fine and it will become permanent. But Delta has done its best to make it sound like they don't really think this is a permanent change.
I want to know what they would want to operate instead.
Probably more LA or Seattle.
Yeah, I was thinking. I was assuming they'd go double daily in some of the markets where they're only single daily now.
That makes sense. Keep Portland, you think?
No.
Dead?
Yeah.
They might also consider Salt Lake for connecting flow.
Well, that can make sense, yeah.
They did that for a while to Narita.
Did they? Yeah, I mean, I don't know how performance is. Do they have high issues there?
They do, but if they're doing it with an A350, I don't think it's a problem.
Or maybe the 330neo could also.
Yeah, probably the Neo, yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
United has not weighed in as of Sunday afternoon when we're recording this. So that's the other one that obviously, if there's an objection, it gets dicey for the DOT to decide how to handle it.
I feel like United's kind of happy with what they got going on.
Yeah, they've got Newark, San Francisco, and LA, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, United
Chicago,
and
they're operating Chicago.
Yeah. Right. This is the question of, and United has the onward partner feed from ANA. Is United happier keeping more operations there?
I mean, the Haneda traffic from Newark and Chicago, those flights are going out pretty full.
Yeah, I don't know. I think like we talked about though, like the China connections and stuff. Like Japan's like a clear place to do that.
Yeah,
I think United's pretty pleased with how things are going.
Yeah, and they're still flying Newark and I think Chicago to Narita as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they've got 2 flights a day to Tokyo to 2 different airports, and they're doing fine.
I can see that
with the China connections. I would imagine that the Narita flights are basically all people going through, or many of those are people going through to China.
Maybe. I mean, it's
interesting to see that data.
It's probably beyond China, beyond Japan too.
Beyond
China, because there's a lot of, like Chicago to there you can do one stop to any number of places in Asia. And same thing from Newark, because those are the only Asian destinations they're flying right now. They're not doing Hong Kong.
San Francisco, Hong Kong still hasn't come back?
No, San Francisco, Hong Kong has, but Newark and Chicago, Hong Kong have.
Yeah, but it's because they can't fly via Russia.
Yeah. Let's talk about Norse and their winter plans.
Hey, listen, man, I want to go to Thailand in the winter too. Or maybe the Caribbean.
Is that what they're going to do? Is they're just going to operate some one-offs to these places?
They're not even one-offs. They're doing full unscheduled service. They're going to do daily flights from Gatwick to Barbados. And then the other flight, they're going to do take one of the planes and split it between, I think, was it Kingston and Montego Bay, Jamaica?
Yeah.
And then another plane's going to fly Oslo to Bangkok. And that Oslo to Bangkok is a very strong market in the winter. So that one makes some sense to me. All these markets make some sense to me. Like, they all have solid demand. It's a question of whether Norse can convert on that, or if it's, they're going to end up very unhappy with what people are actually willing to fly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking that's a lot of seats to fill
Yeah, I mean, right? You can sell good package tours to the Caribbean, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, Oslo Bangkok is only twice a week.
Okay.
I think so. So, I mean, that's not terrible.
It's probably enough for holiday travelers, right?
But the Bridgetown one is daily, which is
Barbados, the UK Barbados traffic. Remember, that was a Concorde route at one point.
yeah.
I think Americans mostly wonder about that a lot, but that market, for whatever reason, has always been big.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. It's, it's a hot destination or a warm destination when it's gray and rainy in the UK. So,
yeah, it's weird to me, like, why that of all the Caribbean markets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why that over Jamaica? Why that over the Virgin Islands or any other number of markets? But that one, for whatever reason, has proven strong premium traffic and resilient over the years. Now, obviously, Norse is not going to be taking the premium traffic that used to fly Concorde, but
I would say Barbados probably because it's more developed than some of the British Virgin Islands, right?
Yeah.
In Jamaica, there's a safety aspect of it, or if you want to leave the resort. Plus, it's a lot more developed than Barbados.
Yeah. What else we got here? Oracle Opera Hotel Management. A little bit of a problem.
This one came in from one of our listeners. Thanks, Reed.
This is right?
It turns out that it's terrible software with massive security holes in it, and they're like, oh no, it's fine. But it seems that if you're a hotel that had your instance visible on the internet, it was possible for someone to attack it in a way that gave them basically root access to run anything they wanted on the server without credentials. It's unclear if this was actually ever really compromised in a way that, has impact to consumers, but definitely not good.
Wow. I mean, the image that they have of the portal is freaking dated.
Yeah, if you read the story in the show notes that we link to, the guy who did it was like, yeah, we decided we're at some hackathon, whatever, and we just saw the logon screen and figured, look at it, this looks like it's from CompuServe in the 90s or something. I'm sure there's a bug in this one. And they were right, but it was literally like, we chose this one because it looked bad.
Giving off some GeoCities vibes is the
what he said, yeah.
It does kind of look like GeoCities. I'll give them that. Yeah.
I will say, though, I logged on to something the other day and got a, about the author link to a tripod page. I didn't know if tripod.com was still alive.
Oh, wow.
Oh, man. Air Canada is going to give a free Wi-Fi option for other loyalty programs? Really?
So I'm obviously obsessed with Wi-Fi on airplanes, and we don't talk about it enough in my mind, but I try to be nice to our listeners. So it's free messaging as of last week globally. Okay. So that's cool. It's just messaging, but at least it's free. The interesting thing about it is, we think Delta's version of free Wi-Fi, you have to log in, which, is fine. But on Delta's, you have to log in using your SkyMiles number.
Mm-hmm.
JetBlue arguably had the same thing, except there was always, since the beginning, you were supposed to log in using your TrueBlue account. On the JetBlue one, there's always a guest option.
Okay.
In this case, though, Air Canada's doing they want you to be an Aeroplan member, but if you happen to be a member of a strategic partner program, and they named Emirates, Miles & More, and United Mileage Plus in the release, and they said there's others. I don't know which the others are. But if you're a member of one of those, you can also use the free without having to also have an Aeroplan account. So it's sort of respecting the fact that you might be a partner player rather than tied to the company that's offering the service. I like that.
I do too. I want to see the implementation. I'd love to know what they're doing to authenticate all this, but
yeah, they say you have to have the number on your booking.
Okay.
So it would seem that authentication happens at some point during the reservation process.
Okay. Yeah, and then it just says, okay, when this person logs in or goes to it, then they get it. Yeah.
I have not seen the implementation directly either, of course, but I like the idea.
I like the idea. Yeah. Foz, this can come in handy for you.
Sure.
You're a new Air Canada lover, I think.
Slowly chipping away at 500 miles a time. A painful journey.
And then the FAA has canceled plans to move 30 controllers from Long Island to Pennsylvania as part of the airspace reassignment. What?
So remember we talked I think we talked a couple weeks ago about this, that the FAA was reassigning some of the airspace south of Newark to the Philadelphia Center from New York Center.
Yes.
That involved initially moving a bunch of controllers from Long Island down to Philly to work in that center and handle those planes because they're going to shift some of the demand. Now, what's weird about that to me, there's a couple things. One, if they're not moving these people, are they still moving the airspace? And that's not clear. Two, the whole point was to have more, it seemed that the point was to have more controllers in New York able to handle the New York space. And so if they were going to take the planes away, but then also take the controllers away, how was that going to work?
Yep.
So some open questions here, but apparently the protests from the controllers were heard by the FAA and they have backed off of the plan to force transfers on people.
Wow.
So that's mostly good news, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Delta is adding LaGuardia Salt Lake City for a couple of months this summer. What?
Nice line, right?
Yeah.
It is longer than 1,500 miles, which is a problem because of the perimeter rule at LaGuardia.
So is it running on Saturdays, or they have
Saturdays.
special? Okay.
Yep. So the perimeter rule at LaGuardia doesn't exist on Saturdays.
So once a week.
Once a week, you can fly Delta on an A220-100. So that's like, 115 seats, I think?
I don't know. It kind of sounds like fun.
But why? Where are you connecting to that this makes sense?
Well, it's once a week, man.
I understand, but what's the point? Is there really that much O&D traffic for Salt Lake City on once a week? Or what's really going on, right? You can connect to any number of other hubs to go beyond that.
That's a good question. I mean, what if it's more about traffic on the LaGuardia side?
Okay, but Salt Lake to LaGuardia to somewhere. Again, why would you want to connect in LaGuardia?
I don't know.
Why? I question people who want to connect in New York, period.
Any thoughts, Seth?
I have no idea why they're doing it. I mean, I have some thoughts on why they're doing it. Part of it, I imagine, is also summer slot, is slot usage, and there's some flexibility in the slots this summer. So maybe they're trying this out to see if they have to cancel a bunch of them or something else. Maybe the FAA will be a little more forgiving in some of those ways. But
I personally, my gut says Delta is trying to use this. They will price this flight under others to force people on it to come back and say we need to have this permanently.
Interesting.
I can see that.
I think United should go with LA LaGuardia then on Saturday.
Spirit did that, remember?
Yeah, I think they should do that or something stupid like that.
Spirit absolutely ran LA LaGuardia for a hot second last summer.
Or Alaska do it out of Seattle? That would be awesome.
Saturday only service doesn't work for, I don't want to say obvious reasons, but for obvious reasons.
I know. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Just for giggles.
I mean, way back in the day, Continental used to run Aruba.
Yeah, they did.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, because they were like, we can run it once a day and make some money. And
they ran it once a week for straight up for timeshare traffic. And it was a plane that basically came in from Houston late the night before, wasn't going to do an extra Houston turn because they didn't need as many flights down there because it wasn't business travel week. And then it did its turn, and then Sunday through Friday it would do its Houston business traveler stuff.
Yeah, makes sense.
So,
last up, let's talk about top carriers at JFK. I'll take a guess. The number 1 and 2, American and Delta.
Nope.
No?
Yeah.
Really?
Yep. You got one right. JetBlue's number 2, Delta's number 1, JetBlue number 2.
Okay, American number 3.
American number 3.
Okay. BA.
So this is where it gets really.
Can we be careful here? What are we counting by?
Number of
seats.
departures. Average daily departures.
Average daily departures, not seats.
Not seats. Okay. I was just going to say, because I can sort this data in many different ways. Yeah. Okay.
So number of departures. Okay, so it couldn't be BA then, because they run, a flight every hour from the morning time, I guess?
So I'll give the number 3 is American with 96 departures. The number 4 is 12 daily departures average.
I'd have to go I mean, I think it's Alaska at that point.
You are correct.
But okay, so then where's BA on this?
Just behind them.
No, number 6, Avianca and BA are tied for 9.
I guess it depends. Which month were you looking at? I'm looking at May and BA beats Avianca, but yeah.
I'd forget. I forget where I read this, but I did read it somewhere. But the Alaska thing was the one that would surprise me the most.
Huh.
Yeah. I would never think Alaska is in the top 5 carriers at JFK.
Well, also, though, like, is having 12 departures a day, like, is that a lot? Like, for an airport as big as JFK?
I mean, if number 3 was, like, just under 100 and Alaska's at 12-ish, that's a pretty big drop.
I wonder, I mean, if you flip it and you said by seats.
I wonder, by seats, BA moves ahead of Alaska.
Okay.
And Virgin Atlantic becomes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th with just under 60,000, but only 7 daily departures.
Okay.
Air France, Emirates, and then Avianca roll around up the top 10. Aer Lingus, KLM, LATAM, Turkish. I'm actually certain. I don't think we talked about this. Do you see Turkish has a daytime flight from JFK now?
Yes.
No, I didn't see. What time does it leave? In like 7 a.m. or something?
6.
Holy shit.
Then it gets in at like 11 p.m., but technically it's a daytime flight.
I mean, it's kind of nice. I mean, leaving at 6 a.m. is brutal, but
arriving at midnight, like unless you're connecting onward, is tough. Also, just by the time you get through, I mean, you land at 11:30. It's gonna be like 12:30 by the time you can walk to immigration with how big that airport is.
I mean, I guess the upside is if you stay awake the entire time, which I've seen people do on transatlantics, and I don't know what they're doing. I guess you are adjusted because then you just crash when you get to the hotel.
That's the theory.
I mean, but there's a bunch of flights that run after midnight, right? And so it's great for those because you're not getting into your destination at like 2 a.m.
I mean, I could see, because you could theoretically use this as like the flights that go to like Tbilisi, like some of those weird 4 a.m. arrivals. That's freaking brutal, though.
Like Pakistan and all those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can roll in at 6 a.m. now, 7 a.m. instead of middle of the night.
Yeah. It makes sense to me for those routes. I think it's rough if you're just going to Istanbul.
Yeah. I think that's a show, guys. Anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah.
No?
I hear cool.
Sorry. It's spring has finally sprung here, and I got the windows open.
It's okay.
I made a couple months of this.
I think for our Patreon subscribers, we've got Foz's trip report. We've got some fun stuff to talk about. We've got some Go Wild Pass marketing for the summer, and then some premium carriers from Bermuda that we're going to talk about as well for the Patreon subscribers. If you're not one, you can become one if you'd like. Or you can just leave us a comment or tweet us. We love to hear from you guys. As you heard from Seth, we had a number of comments from listeners this week, so we loved hearing from our listeners. So just send us a comment. We'll talk to you next time. Happy travels. Take care.
Bye-bye.